My position as the elected constitutional law enforcement authority is to protect the citizens of this county, and we're fighting an uphill battle with Sacramento and Washington, D.C. Our prior district attorney actually told people she wanted a cop's head on her wall to mount. Wise up, smell the coffee here, because unless we secure that border, it's going to continue to get worse, and we are going to have an apocalyptic time when this comes to fruition.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Steve Hilton Show. We got a very special guest today. We have a sheriff, so get ready for that. A sheriff that I met on the road in California, and he's amazing. And wait till you hear the story that he's got to tell about crime in his county. It involves the Mexican cartels, but an angle on that you've never heard anywhere else before, I can guarantee it. And it's an amazing story that is coming up. But I want to start today with the big story of the week, which was the latest in Kamala Mania, let's call it that, which is this kind of absurd fawning over Kamala Harris from the media. And now it's extended to her new running mate. So we're taping this on Wednesday, August the 7th. This is the day after she announced that her running mate would be Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota. And as expected, the state-run media, as I now think we should call it, oh, it's so amazing, she's picked this white guy, he's fantastic. First time they've been really excited about that for a long time. So we have all the fawning coverage of Tim Walz, but let's have a bit of an antidote and a reality check on what this really means. First of all, in terms of Tim Walz, look, I don't know too much about him. I've read exactly what you've read, I'm sure by now, which is that he has been an advocate of pretty far left policies in his home state. And, you know, you can go through the list, but there's so much evidence of his support for all sorts of extremism, climate extremism, gender extremism, economic extremism, bad things that are way out of step with the majority of Americans, and certainly the kind of middle ground of politics where elections tend to be won or lost. So he seems completely outside the mainstream, despite the manner. And I can see that that's what they're hoping to be the focus, his kind of, what do they call it? White dad vibes or Midwest dad vibes. I don't know what they call it, something like that. They want that to be the focus rather than his policy positions, just as they want the vibes around Kamala to be the focus rather than her policy positions. We'll get to them in a second. I think the really interesting thing about this choice is actually what it tells us about Kamala Harris and what it reveals about her character and where she's coming from politically, and therefore what it can lead us to expect from her if she were elected president. And let's be very clear, none of it's good. There was a very clear lobbying campaign going on in the run-up to this choice. It was very, very evident that the left of the party, they wanted Tim Walz, and also very clear that they didn't want the other candidate who was in the mix when the decision was being made. It apparently came down to two people, Tim Walz from Minnesota and Governor Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania. Of course, there's the Israel policy aspect to that, Gaza, the protests, the fact that Josh Shapiro is Jewish. That's all very much part of the story. But I think even more than that, it was just a clear message that it sends that when you have members of the party, the left wing of the party, lobbying and pushing for a particular character to be selected as running mate, well, guess what she does? She caves. She gives in. She gives the left what they want. That is what we need to understand. That's the fundamental thing that we need to understand from this selection. It wasn't like a 50-50 thing and different parts of the party would be happy in weird different combinations with each of these candidates. No, it's a very clear thing. There's the left-wing choice and there's the mainstream choice. The mainstream choice was Josh Shapiro. The left-wing choice was Tim Walz. It was very, very clear. And she went with the left. And that's exactly what I've been saying all along, because that is the danger with Kamala Harris. Just like Biden, she is a machine politician, a transactional machine politician. We've talked about on this show now for weeks. That is the story of her political career. No deep convictions or beliefs that she sticks to regardless of the circumstances. No, she goes with the flow and goes wherever the power lies, the power that will help her rise. That's been the story. And that's why you see her with so many different positions. I mean, they call it flip-flopping, but, on crime and all these other things, but it's not really doing justice to it. It's worse than flip-flopping. It's actually a consistency of being unprincipled and just doing what is politically expedient. That's the consistent theme. And here we see it in operation again, but in a very dramatic way, because it shows you how, if you like, how committed she is to being inconsistent and how committed she is to being politically expedient rather than principled. Because in the form of Josh Shapiro, she had someone who you could say, I mean, nothing's guaranteed in politics, but as the popular governor of Pennsylvania, whose approval ratings are way higher either than hers or Donald Trump's or anyone else's in Pennsylvania, you could really have made the case, because Pennsylvania in the electoral map calculations is so important now for Kamala Harris. Most of the people who follow this say that she cannot win without Pennsylvania. Just looking at the electoral map now, she can't win without Pennsylvania. You have a popular governor of Pennsylvania, and people say, well, the vice presidential pick doesn't usually deliver a state, but in this case, it would really have boosted her chances. And you know that the Republicans, the Trump campaign, everyone would have been much more concerned about Josh Shapiro, and they were relieved that she picked Tim Walz. And so that's an amazing outcome there, because it tells you that even in the face of something that would have helped her, she goes with appeasing the left, placating the left, pandering to the left. And if she does that with this, with her first big decision, what does that tell us about what she'd be like as president? It tells us that she would cave to the left. And that's why she's worse than Biden, actually, because at least with Biden, you've got someone there for, all his 50 plus years, basically seen as a moderate, a kind of establishment person, no real convictions, just like her, transactional politician, but kind of in the center, certainly not an extremist. And then as president, of course, he caved to the left and gave them what they want, but at least from a position of being pretty much a centrist himself. With Kamala Harris, it's much worse, because her beliefs, actually, to the extent that we can discern them, they are on the left. She's a California Democrat from the Bay Area. And so it's kind of a left-wing instinct added to the left-wing pandering. It's really dangerous. And if we want any further proof of the fact that she's on the left, and this ticket is now on the left, just today, a story broke that Kamala Harris and her husband have been donating to an organization that is very clearly a defund the police organization, giving money, and not just in 2020 when she was saying all these things about reimagining the justice system and basically going along with the defund the police narrative at the time of the BLM riots and so on, because it was politically expedient then. Not just in 2020, this is last year she was giving money to this group, defund the police. And so yet again, I'm sure we'll see the same tactic, which is anything inconvenient or, that could cause a problem. This is what they're doing with all her positions that she's espoused in the past on fracking and Medicare for all and illegal immigrants and sanctuary cities and all these kinds of things. They're just saying, well, that doesn't apply anymore. Through a press spokesman, they're just saying, yes, she doesn't think that anymore. It's totally outrageous, not telling us what she actually thinks herself and justifying these supposed changes of position. So I'm sure they'll try and do that with this, but it's very difficult to do that when it was last year, not 4 years ago, not ancient history. Last year, she's supporting defund the police. And that brings us back to Tim Walz, of course, because the worst cases of the rioting with the burning down of the police station in Minneapolis were in his state. And so you saw then a governor who just let it all burn down. And then, of course, at that time, Kamala Harris was urging people to give money to the fund to bail out the rioters. So what a couple they make. It is absolutely clear from this choice of Tim Walz that Kamala Harris will always cave to the left. That's why she would be an absolute disaster as president. All right, for our policy conversation this week, it is my great honor to welcome a new friend, someone I met last week, Sheriff Warnke. He's the sheriff of Merced County. And he told me a story that just, we have that phrase, jaw-dropping. My jaw dropped, and I thought, well, I have to share this with all of you. And I'm very excited that the sheriff could join us today. And I'm sure we'll have a lot of conversation beyond this particular story. But let's start there, Sheriff. Um, this
Okay.
story that you told me when I asked you, what's going on in your county, what are the main crime issues, and so on. One of the things you told me was a story involving avocados, the Mexican cartels, and farm equipment, and I just couldn't believe it. So
Yeah.
tell everyone what you told me.
If folks do a little research about Merced County, we're dead center in California in the Central Valley, and we are predominantly ag producers. The Central Valley is number one in the whole world as far as ag producing, which means there's a lot of farmers, and their equipment is not cheap, and we're getting a lot of equipment stolen. So my ag investigators were doing follow up, and what we're finding is the equipment was being stolen, put into these shipping containers, and then trucked into Mexico. Well, we did further research, and it seems that not only are the cartels dealing with narcotics and human trafficking and all that we consider crime and we're not involved with, but they're going after the avocado producers in Mexico. And so they're diversifying and going after something on a product that's nationally, worldwide, and they're profiting now on the avocado market. And the poor farmers, they're laying victim to it either by threats or having to pay them for protection money. But that's why we got a lot of our equipment heading south of the border. And we know this for a fact because most of the farmers here have tracking devices on their equipment. And when they come out of those containers, tracking device goes off and we see where it's located and it's gone. So it's just how things, the ebb and flow of crime, it's the agriculture is a hot commodity. Everybody's got to eat. The major population doesn't do drugs. It's everybody's got to eat. And so now they're diversifying into that, and especially into a country like Mexico that is not very well governed as far as law and order is concerned. So it's going to affect, and it's starting to affect worldwide. If I watch a lot of clips on produce, and one of the things they're talking about is the avocado market and how uh, it's going to be real expensive. Not that it hasn't been, but it's going to be going up. And apparently the cartels are going to be cashing in on that now. So, folks, when we're doing this, I mean, everything that we touch law enforcement wise, agriculture wise, it affects everybody. And now this is rearing its head. I just happened to see on the news recently, somebody else was actually talking about the cartels and avocado farming. So, and I'm sure
It's
it's going to
amazing.
be going past avocados. So you figure other crops that is known in Mexico. Think of the agave plant. Okay, tequila. That's
Tequila.
a
Yeah.
huge item. So it's just one of those things because of a not well governed country for law and order. It's allowing this to happen. So we're doing everything we can to help our farmers because ag is so big here. It's so prevalent. That's our number one uh, industry, and it's really taken a toll. Besides the tractors, we have copper wire being stolen, and it's every jurisdiction. It's not just solely Merced County. Every county that's a predominant ag county is getting hit like this.
The level of sophistication and organization of the cartels. I mean, funnily enough, I was just at a lunch the other day with Congressman Byron Donalds, and we're good friends. We go back a long way, and he was telling me about he recently visited the border and was describing how in Arizona, not in California, and he was saying effectively they have functional control of the border, the cartels. And so that leads me to the next question for you, which again we discussed, which is when you've got like it's one thing when you talk about fentanyl, which is tiny amounts do a huge amount of damage, and so you would imagine that's harder to detect and enforce the prohibition and so on, and that's why we see it coming in the
Right.
scale that it is. But with farm equipment, tractors, it's like, how is it possible that they can just end up in Mexico, stolen tractors?
Well, it's because of our current federal government that has allowed this uh, facade to saying, "Oh, we got secure border." We don't have secure borders. I can go from county to county as easy as they can come into to our country, and that's the primary reason this is allowed to take place. We got this equipment going on, and we got illegal immigrants coming across, and It's to the point where I have to report every year if I have somebody that's here illegally that comes into my jail that I have deported. It's mandated by law out of Sacramento that we do that. So the sheriffs up and down the state are pulling what's left of our hair out, and it's because of policies like this. I feel for those folks down in our southern border because I deal with the sheriffs in Southern California, primarily San Diego County, and it's the Wild West. There is no control, and make no mistake, these folks coming across here, we're being invaded, and I guarantee you, it's not the ones that are coming here to do farm labor. That's not. It's the ones that are coming across here. They're going to get their hands on weapons, and they're going to come after us here because of those policies. What we're dealing with the farm equipment, that's a microcosm to the huge problem that's coming in here. Just that we're dealing with farm equipment going down there should tell you we got tractors being smuggled in to Mexico, and and they're not being stopped.
It's an amazing example of the total loss of control of the border. It's stunning. Can you talk a bit then about just pick up on what you were just discussing, which is the criminal element coming in, and can you relate it to the way that the sanctuary state policy operates in California? I'd love to hear about that from your perspective.
Well, it's my perspective. Okay, perception is reality. So when I have the perception, we've got the population that wants the illegal immigrants to be okay coming in here aren't looking at that picture, because the folks that are coming in under the guise of that, they're coming from Middle Eastern countries and even some south of the border, but it's mostly the Middle Eastern countries that are coming in, and they're setting up pockets locally. We've seen an uptick in Chinese cartel here in the valley. I'm dealing with a sheriff on one of our coastal counties that we're finding them coming in for the illegal marijuana grows. Well, the fact that people, marijuana is not a problem. Well, it's not the plant, it's what goes with it. It's the same with, well, those illegal immigrants aren't the problem. Well, it's what's coming with them that is the problem. When we're arresting people and we find out they're on a worldwide hit list as far as being watched, we just had a sheriff's conference and we're talking about known watched terrorists coming across the border, knowing this and trying to find them. Now, I will tell you, my hat's off to our Border Patrol because they're trying to get a good job done, but their hands are tied because of who their current boss is. So hopefully that'll change in November and we'll get that part taken care of. But to deal with law enforcement the way we're having to deal with it, we're getting our hands tied more and more. And now the federal government's saying, it's all right, open arm embrace. Well, no, I'm sorry, I can't do it. We've got Sheriff Bianco in Riverside County. Okay, I'm trying to convince that man to run for governor. I hope he does, because his ideas and because of his connection with the border counties is, we're getting beat up, and we've got to have somebody in office to help us as law enforcement take care of these problems. I don't want to see any inhumanity going on. That's not. But my job is my position as the elected constitutional law enforcement authority is to protect the citizens of this county. And I work with 57 other elected constitutional, and we're fighting an uphill battle with Sacramento and Washington, D.C. And it's just mind-boggling, frustrating to see what we're having to do. So, you talk about that. We can get off in the weeds on so many different things, but a lot of it has to do with the border. Our human trafficking problem is because of an open border. Folks, wise up, smell the coffee here, because unless we secure that border, it's going to continue to get worse, and we are going to have an apocalyptic time when this comes to fruition. Don't think for a minute that these pocket cells that are setting up aren't going to happen. They are going to happen, and it's because our federal government failed to protect the United States citizen.
And here in California, you have a combination of, just as you touched on, the federal government that believes in whatever they say. Clearly, they have the ideology of open borders, the far left ideology. That's the operational, mindset, and that is replicated. It's actually even worse with the Democrats here in California. So you have to double, at least in Texas, right? Eventually, I would say Greg Abbott acted too late. Could have done a lot more earlier, but whatever. He did it in the end, and he got really tough. And then almost overnight, actually, the flows moved to California, where it's basically open because you've got both levels of government.
Well, they're talking when you say that the Sacramento government, the politicians there, have threatened prosecution against any sheriff that goes against their wishes.
Wow.
And I've got deputy sheriffs who are afraid to do stuff because everything's micromanaged and the amount of training. I always want the training, but when the politicians go after the cops for doing their jobs, we have a problem. We have a severe problem with it. And people can check my record, Google my name. You'll see a whole bunch of stuff what gone on in this county. We do police our own, but to have the government that has no knowledge of law enforcement telling us how to do it bothers me.
What are they threatening to prosecute you and your colleagues, other sheriffs, for? What
If
specific?
first off, if I cooperate with the federal government, primarily ICE, I can be prosecuted for cooperating with another agency. So, yeah, how far would that go? I don't know, but unless now our current district attorney, that'll never happen with her. She's for the people right now. I'm not telling
Right.
you, we got a great district attorney. Our prior district attorney, we were nervous because she actually told people she wanted a cop's head on her wall to mount. She did.
Wow.
I mean, that was their
Wow.
target. And that's what we do. There's certain cities, and there's one county specific, we'll just say San Francisco City, you can figure the county,
Yeah.
that I won't send any deputies to. Alameda County, I won't send because they've got a DA that wants to prosecute cops for doing their job. Guess what? Ask for mutual aid. Don't ask this cowboy because it ain't happening. Because I want to protect my deputies. When they go someplace and they have to use force, well, that's what happens. They want us to get spit on, beat on, and everything else and not be able to protect ourselves or to effect an arrest. They're living in fairy tale land. And
Yeah.
it all stems from this left-wing propaganda that we're facing. I've been watching all the clips and everything, and it's just, I can't believe you got people think that way.
No,
It's
it's amazing.
the socialist attitude is just, I shake my head.
And also, you see the results. I mean, look, it's not a mystery, right? They've had it their own way for like nearly 20 years at the state level, and in a place like San Francisco and the Bay Area and so on, these big cities, Los Angeles, all Democrat, nearly 20 years, nonstop, uninterrupted. And you see the results. I mean, it's total chaos. I mean, look at Oakland, Alameda. You talk about Alameda County. I mean, it's just
Yes.
collapsing into total chaos and like apocalyptic collapse of civilization, basically, in one of our great cities in California. It's unbelievable.
So now now I understand you live near the Bay Area, and
Yeah.
the city of Vallejo has had nothing but problems. I mean, they can't get cops. And the city council there wants to work with the sheriff. And we have the sheriff conferences, and to hear his story about trying to help that city out and based upon their BS policies is tough. They can't get people to come back. And they want to talk about law and order. I would say, last time we chatted with the sheriff of that county, he was talking about not being able to respond to most of their calls because they don't have enough personnel. It's crazy.
And the thing is that they say, I mean, if we take it back a few years, right, you had the defund the police, and a lot of these politicians were jumping on that bandwagon. And now they say, well, we didn't really defund and whatever. But even if you can give them that, all right, you didn't literally cut the budgets massively or whatever, they demoralize all the policies, as you say, the rhetoric, the policies, all of it demoralizes the police. So you think, well, why bother? Why should
Yeah.
I do this if no one's going to stand behind me when I put myself on the line? That's what you see up and down the state.
Yeah, and that's the exact reason because I have briefings. I'm very close with my agency, and the cops will come into my office, and they say, "Boss, why should we bother? We're going to get why do we do this?" And I tell them why we do it. God sent us down here to do this, and that's why we're doing it. We're warriors in that category. Somebody's got to do it, and if people don't understand that, it's not a power trip. It's the sheriff is the last line of defense for our citizens based upon the Constitution. And we have a governor in this state that doesn't want the sheriff to be elected. He wants all sheriffs to be appointed. He has made it very clear that he wants the Board of Supervisors to appoint a sheriff and not have that sheriff elected. Folks, if we lose the elected sheriff, your protection against a tyrannical government is gone. Right now, the sheriff is the office throughout the nation that would stand between you and that BS government coming in. If the FBI said, we're going to collect the guns, the sheriff has the authority to say no, has that authority. They can't just willy-nilly come in there because of the Constitution. So let's be very aware of what's going on. What I see happening is our Democratic Party is like that frog in boiling water.
Yeah.
Okay, right? They're turning that heat up so slowly, people aren't seeing it. Well, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it daily. And pretty soon you're going to be in boiling water, and you didn't realize they were turning it up until it's too late. So
It's a great analogy. It's exactly right. That's crazy. I mean, I just think, for example, of, but I mean, just to the point you just made, think about LA County, our biggest county. So Sheriff Alex Villanueva, who I know, not the sheriff anymore, he was so harassed and pursued by the board of supervisors there because they didn't, because he was actually trying to do his best. I mean, he's a Democrat, but one of the very few remaining sensible ones, I think, and he was trying to do his best and stand up to this nonsense, and they basically tried to destroy him.
Yeah,
the politicians.
Yeah. What is a reminder for the board of supervisors is the supervisors, depending on the districts, I think most of them have 5, like this county has 5. Each one of the supervisors represents that district. Individually, a supervisor has no authority. They don't have authority over one employee, none. It takes all 5 of them to get together collectively to be collective on that authority. The sheriff has 100% of the county and makes decisions daily, acts on them daily, has the authority to take somebody's freedom from them. Okay. And like in my position, I'm also the coroner. So the authority of the sheriff, what I love about my county, and I say my county, is the citizens here support their sheriff big time. And that's what is needed in these counties. If the citizens see the supervisors going after a sheriff, now if the sheriff needs to be going after, then by all means. But if you can see it's just because they don't agree on policy, the citizens need to stand up for the sheriff, because that's the one that's going to stand in front of anybody for your rights. Exactly. Nobody else, not even the supervisors, have the authority to do that. Policymakers, and I got to tell you, I've got a wonderful working relationship with my supervisors now. Okay, we have blocked horns several times, but it takes the position of sheriff to get in and get things done, and that's what America needs to understand. And I actually have a book. It's called The Sheriff, America's Last Line of Defense. And it's because of the constitutional authority that the people have given that position. And it's the only one. And if the people want a new sheriff, they'll get one. If they didn't like the way I was doing my job, I would be unemployed, because they're that steadfast here.
Yes.
So
and I love that you're talking about this. Funnily enough, back in the day in England, when I was working as a policy advisor in the UK government to the Prime Minister, David Cameron, in 10 Downing Street, and that's one of the reforms that I argued for bringing in England, was the elected sheriff position, because in England you have still, I mean, it's better. People wouldn't go that far. I wasn't able to win that argument, but now we have elected police commissioners, so there's a little bit more direct accountability. But it wasn't like that. It was just this amorphous blob of bureaucracy, these police departments, and no one really knew who was responsible. And so you saw a real loss of faith in policing, actually, and it became more and more bureaucratic, all this stuff going in terms of the priorities that wasn't really about fighting crime. And that direct accountability to the people, I think, is absolutely vital.
I agree with you 100%. It's the only way the people can have a say in their law enforcement. One of the supervisors and I have been dealing with the situation in the northern part of my county. It has nothing to do with, I say, law enforcement per se, but because he and I are stepping in to help that community, I think we're going to take care of a problem that we see that could be in the future. But it took 2 elected people who report to the people to step in and help. My lovely bride of 43 years keeps, she asks me all the time, gotta retire. And I finally told her the other day, she said, what's it going to take? I said, when I know that somebody's behind me that has the passion for this county that I do. And she says, crap, you're never retiring, So, so that's my take. I work every day. I pray every day. And I remember who's actually in charge, the person right here. when I go to work, I got to remember that. And I want the people to know that. When I ran for this position, I let them know that. So I believe in that wholeheartedly. But when it comes to law enforcement, when it comes to take care of the people, I get very feisty.
Well,
They
I saw it firsthand. I mean, we met when I did an event for Joanna Garcia Rose. She's running for state assembly. She's fantastic, as we both agreed, and I just saw the reaction that you and the love for you and appreciation for what you do is very evident to me. Last question. I want to go back to a detailed question because it really bothers me, and we touched on it earlier. This going back to the whole border conversation and illegal immigrants, and particularly those who commit crime. I mean, this sanctuary state policy, the law. I just want to really understand how it actually interacts with what on a daily basis, because it seems so crazy, and it also seems so wrong that at a county level you can't do anything about that you can't challenge something that, and you can't run your operation the way you think it should be run, given that you're directly elected.
exactly, and the policy that they do it. And like I said, we as sheriffs have been threatened with prosecution if we cooperate with ICE. And when I first became a deputy in 1979, we had the authority then. We had a situation where we knew we had somebody here illegally and prove it. We would, under Title 8 of the U.S. government code, we could arrest people based solely on them being in this country illegally. Okay, and we would have that, and we would have immigration coming in on a daily basis. We were interacting. The crime rate that we had back in those days was a whole lot different than it is now. But it's the ancillary rules that they come up with. Well, if they got here illegally but had a baby here, and I don't care what country, and people want to say that it's a racial thing. No, if they come here from another country and they start doing that, the laws still apply to them as far or the rules based upon how they got here. It is mind-boggling to see that kind of policy coming down and actually have them threaten law enforcement for doing their job. So my job here is if I have somebody that we arrest for pick a crime, other than the illegal part, and we determine that they are here illegally, we go through a process. And trust me when I say this, if I get them here illegally, I'm making the call. Okay, I do make a report. That's the criteria I have to do once a year. And because I'm going to a conference, my undersheriff's going to be making a report here in the near future. So we give the stats on what's going on, and we get people in there, advocates. We've got a UC here in this county, and you ought to see the rhetoric coming in based upon that. Like, folks are here illegally, and then if I have military equipment, oh my gosh. Well, I actually received military equipment from another sheriff in a different county because he was receiving political pressure for having it. I don't care. Come on down, because that equipment we need. And it came to fruition 2 years ago when we had some flooding. We used every bit of that military equipment, that attack equipment, to rescue several hundred people. So I'll just stand my ground. They can't do anything. If the people want a new sheriff, they will bring one on. But until said time, I will continue to don this uniform and do my job. And Steve, I will tell you, I was talking to your producer. I didn't know much about you when we met, but I've learned a lot since then. And I'm actually proud that you asked me to be on your podcast. Thank you so much, because of your policy beliefs and your standards. We need men like you out there telling the truth of what's going on. And the fact that you even wanted to talk to me was an honor. So I appreciate that invite.
Likewise, thank you very much, and thank you for what you do and all your team, because it's the bravest thing to put yourself out there to protect us, and it makes me sick, frankly, that not just the lack of appreciation, but the active undermining of what you do. It's really beyond, but and I think normal people are with you.
Yeah,
that in your county.
The fortunate part is most of the population in this county are normal.
Exactly right. Exactly.
So, folks, you need to keep your sheriff, and this is nationwide, because the sheriff is the last line of defense for everybody that's wanting to be a free American.
Amen to that. Thank you, Sheriff. Really appreciate your time today. Hope I'll see you soon. Thank you.
I hope so, Steve. Thank you very much.
Right, back with us for California Corner. We haven't seen each other for a while. It's Susan Shelley. It's great to see you, Susan. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. It feels like the sort of the unbelievable kind of pace of events just keeps accelerating. When are we going to slow down? And that's why it's so important, because we've got so much going on at the national level. That's why I'm really have been looking forward to this conversation, because you always bring us up to speed with the details of what's happening here in California, which so often just get overlooked because there's so much going on and no one really digs into it, which is why they get away with all these horrors, because the media doesn't really hold them accountable. Anyway, let's get to some of the stories you've been following for us. There's something going on yet again. They're mucking about with voting. They've got another law about that they want to introduce on how we vote here in California. What's this all about?
Well, it's August, and in August, all of these legislative proposals can get jammed through very quickly and then signed by the governor in September. So you really have to pay attention. Now, tomorrow, which is Wednesday, I don't know what we're taping
Yeah,
this
when
on
people are listening,
Tuesday.
Tuesday the 6th, we're
Right.
taping.
So
Yeah.
on Wednesday, I believe there's going to be a hearing on Senate Bill 299, which is called the California New Motor Voter Program. And what this would do is it would go even further toward automatic voter registration. We already have automatic voter registration at the DMV unless you opt out. You're automatically registered if you check the box that says you're eligible, or that you don't check the box that says you're not eligible, or however they've done that, but it's automatic. And now this would create a list of people who opted out so that the Secretary of State could do outreach to them. So the idea is you go to renew your driver's license and you don't want to register to vote. They're going to put you on a list and they're going to give it to the Secretary of State, and they're going to send you mail and communications and maybe knock on your door and say, wouldn't you like to register to vote? Now, this is supported by some group called the Center for Secure and Modern Elections. But it's, yeah, Orwellian, isn't it? But it's
Modern
opposed.
elections, exactly. Basically ones where Democrats win everything. That's what I think they mean by that.
It's really very frustrating because you want to have some security against fraud. And what they keep doing is passing bills that take away the security against fraud. So they create vulnerabilities. And then they say, well, there's no evidence that there's anything wrong. Well, they won't collect any evidence. They won't allow anyone to collect any evidence. Everything is just on the honor system. So it's very frustrating when they take away even more of the controls on the registration to vote. We have to have accurate and current voter registration according to federal law, and California is just determined to undermine that.
Where is verification of eligibility in any of this in terms of citizenship and so on?
There isn't any. Citizenship is completely on the honor system. There is no verification. There's no verification of residency, and there's no verification of
What?
citizenship, right? The only
So
thing
you
they
can
verify.
write whatever you want and then
Mhm. Yeah, you
amazing.
can go to the polls on the day of the election, and you can register to vote and vote the same day, and you fill out a form that says this is my address, and no one verifies that. It's all on the honor
Are you
system.
kidding? I don't think we've heard that before. I mean, I'm sure we have. There's so much though. So the same day registration, that this is really important. So the same day, I don't think I've quite appreciated this. So same day registration is always part of the list of demands, right? So you could go to the polling place and you
You
say,
Here's my name and this is my address, and
and
you
they
write
don't
it down.
check it against
They
anything.
don't check it against anything. It's a conditional voter registration. It's
I see.
similar to a provisional voter registration, but the
Yeah.
thing is, they don't check anything
And the
at the
concept
end
is that
process.
they then do check, and this is why we have the endless count. It was part of the reason for the endless counting that goes on for weeks. Is it that they're
Right.
then supposed to
They're supposed to
check?
verify, right. Well, the only thing that they verify, I have heard from the registrar's office in LA County and from the Secretary of State that the only thing they verify is whether there is an ineligibility due to some record in the corrections department, a prison record, something like that. They do verify voter
So they
registration
check
against that.
against they do a sort of proactive check against a list of people who are
Right.
not supposed, but they don't actively check whether you're even a resident of California.
They do
Never
not,
mind citizen.
or if you're registering in the district where you really live, because you could register that you're in a
This is
different
amazing.
district.
They
They don't
really don't
verify
check.
that.
And
No.
when you say don't check, is that LA County? Because it's done by county, isn't it?
It's statewide. This is the policy statewide. They do not verify citizenship. That's on the honor system, and they do not verify residency, address at
What
all.
are they? Sorry, is the law that they can't verify, that they're not allowed to try?
Well, I'm not certain if they're allowed to try, but they do not. So Whether there's a law that says they can't, I'm not sure, but they do not. They do not verify citizenship. They will tell you, oh, it's under penalty of perjury. You have to check the box under penalty of perjury that you're a citizen and you're eligible to vote. But there's never been an enforcement that
So
I'm
never mind
aware
the
of.
point about citizens, right? Like, even if you take that out, because that's what often prompts the, very high octane, oh, you're a racist kind of stuff, right? But just take the residency part. So you could just have, like, shown up from Texas and registered to vote on the day, and then go back to Texas, and no one would really know, and you vote in California's election.
Pretty much, and that you can say I live here, and you check the box, and nobody checks. So it's all on the honor system, and it's a vulnerability to fraud. There's no way around it. Similarly, when we have these vote centers, you can go in and you can give a name and address of a registered voter, and you don't have to actually be that person, and they will not be able to refuse to give you a ballot. They can't ask you for ID, and
They
they will give you.
can't.
They can't, and you will get a ballot and you will vote. And even if you turn around and say, ha ha, I fooled you, I'm not this person, they cannot get that ballot out of the count.
So again, is it that they're not allowed to ask for ID, or is it that they're not required to ask for ID? Some do, some don't.
They're not allowed to ask for ID. They're not allowed to require ID. I've had people ask me for my driver's license to simplify checking
Yes,
in, but
yes, me
if I
too.
say,
That's
oh,
why
I
I asked.
don't,
Yeah,
right, if I don't have a driver's license with me, and they cannot
they
refuse.
can't refuse.
Right. They can't require it. We do not have a voter ID law in California.
Well,
Something like
well,
36 states do, and we do not.
it's amazing, and the UK just introduced it, and then the other aspect of this that's so amazing is that what we shouldn't, lose sight of, is that Huntington Beach just voted for voter ID in their elections, and they are being sued by the state, by Gavin Newsom and Bonta, and there's also a law going through the legislature, isn't there, which is to ban anywhere else from any other municipality or place in California from introducing voter ID through a ballot initiative, which is how they did it in Huntington Beach.
And they also
They're
passed a
banning
law,
it.
right? And they passed a law saying no hand counts of no hand recounts
That's right,
of.
because of Shasta, wasn't it?
hmm So I mean,
Shasta County.
every law that they have passed has been removing one of the checks on voter
It's really
security and
amazing.
election
It's
security. And
really shameless. I mean, and then they ask, and then they sort of wonder why people lose trust in elections. I mean, they
exactly,
do all these, and they say, "Oh, there's no evidence of fraud." Okay, but like, why are you deliberately doing all these endless constantly changing, mucking about with the system that inevitably will cause people to question what's going on? And even if there's not a nefarious, even give them that, right? All this fiddling around undermines confidence all the
absolutely, it
time,
does.
changing it.
Right.
And I wanted to go back to the federal law part. So that was because that was interesting. I hadn't heard that before, which is that federal law requires voter rolls to be updated, maintained. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, this is in the motor voter law that Bill Clinton signed in the 1990s. It was a compromise. They said, all right, we're going to have voter registration at all these government offices, including the DMV, but every state is required to have current and accurate voter rolls. They must take action to have current and accurate voter rolls. Now, there have been a ton of lawsuits over how the states do that. And it's been set out in the courts that there are certain procedures. You send a card. If it doesn't come back, you send a card again. You have to a certain number of elections. If no one responds, you can remove their name. But some of the states don't want to remove the names. And there may be good reasons for that, because sometimes names are similar, or you have two people living at the same address who are in a family with the same name or similar, or people are using initials and their name and they're registered twice. And so it's very difficult to clean the voter rolls. So that would be fine. That would be fine if we weren't mailing a ballot
Mailing,
to
exactly.
every registered voter. If
Yeah,
people had to come in and request a ballot by mail and sign a form saying, I want my ballot by mail, that would be one request. If they have to come in and sign a book or a screen at the polling place, that would be one person coming in. But when you mail out ballots, and you see pictures of them where they're stacked up at an
I
apartment
know.
building for previous residents, and they're just sitting there. Now, who's authorized to return them or dispose of them? No one?
Anyone, because we have ballot harvesting.
Right. So
I mean, then
it's a vulnerability.
yeah, and again, it's the just on the facts. Is that is that federal law the one that, for example, has been used by people like Judicial Watch, who had such a great result in terms of cleaning up LA County's rolls? Is
I
that the
believe
law?
I believe that's
Yeah,
the law that they relied on.
yeah.
Yes.
And then I mean, it just reminds me exactly to your point about the all mail-in, mailing ballots for everyone. It reminds me of that very famous phrase of Milton Friedman's, where he said, "You can either have a welfare state and closed board and managed borders, or open borders but no welfare state. You can't have both. If you have both, it's a disaster." And
Right.
it's this sort of analogy to that, isn't it? You can either you can send ballots to everyone, but then you have to check, or the other way around. But if you have both, and that's what we have, it's a disaster.
And people think about the big races, they think about the governor and the president and the senators, but you have to think about the little races like the tax races in each
Yeah.
city that's having a tax measure on the ballot that
Yes.
needs a limited number of votes to pass. If there's fraud, it can be pushed across the finish line pretty easily. And then it's very expensive to do a recount. They've
That
changed
they've
the
made I know this is the point you've been making all along. I've
right,
really internalized this, which is these giant vote centers where everything is sent in. So you have hundreds of thousands of votes. And so if you want to challenge it, you have to pay. And they've
right.
made it very expensive. I mean,
Yes,
it's just yet another example of why centralization is bad. I mean, just another theme of mine over the
exactly.
years. All right, let's move on to there's a whole bunch of energy stories. Let's just try and unpack these. There's Gavin Newsom trying to do something about electricity bills. There's something on permitting for solar and wind. There's, of course, Chevron leaving the state. I mean, just try and take us through some of those.
Well, the general policy in California is to pretend that we don't need fossil fuels and that somehow we can get off natural gas, we can get off petroleum products of all kinds, and we can live on sunshine and breezes. And on this premise, we are paying so much for electricity and gasoline in
Yeah,
California because they're
it's the
refusing
highest
to
in the
allow
country.
right, they're refusing to allow drilling and fracking. They're making everything more expensive for the energy companies. They're coming after the refineries and saying, "You're making too much profit. We want to investigate you," over and over and over again, finding nothing, investigating again. Well, Chevron's had enough. Chevron said this newest law that limits their profit margins, we'll see how much, we haven't decided. They said that's it. And they're going to Texas. So there's 2,000 jobs in Northern California that are going to Texas. And that's gonna leave a mark in the state budget when Chevron leaves the state and joins all these other companies that are leaving the state. So there's that.
So that'll be tax revenue gone, the
Right.
corporate tax revenue from Chevron.
And the personal income tax from all the employees who are
Yeah.
going to be relocated to Texas where there is no income tax. So there's that. And then what you have is this insane pretense that if we just have enough windmills, we don't need natural gas. If you go to CAISO.com, CAISO.com, and you click today's outlook and supply at night, you'll see that the demand for electricity is about, in the summertime, 35,000 megawatts statewide. And the supply from renewables is about 5,000. So, what fills that gap? Every night, when the sun goes down, we rely on natural gas, imported electricity, and we know how that's generated. That's natural gas, coal, maybe nuclear. Our one nuclear power plant, which the governor has tried to close down and then desperately tried to keep open, and large hydroelectric, which does not count as renewable.
They don't count it as renewables. It's insane.
It is insane because nuclear and large hydro should count as renewables, but they don't because the whole idea is to subsidize solar and wind. But solar and wind will never be adequate. They're intermittent. They're no good at night. It's not enough. So, what are they doing in the legislature? They're trying to ease the permitting for new solar and wind projects, offshore wind. This is very expensive. And it's a use of land. In the case of solar, it's a use of land. What could that land be? Agriculture? Could it be housing? What could it be if we weren't putting solar panels on it to try and keep the sun up at night, which we can't? And batteries, the same problem. They last for 4 hours, very expensive. At scale, it is not practical. But they're pursuing this, and it's raising everybody's electricity bills because all of these companies that provide power have to buy natural gas and imported electricity and also pay for these solar projects and wind projects. That's why your bills are so high. So what's the governor doing? Obviously, the polls are showing that people are upset when they open their electricity bill because he has come up with a statement saying, I'm going to do something to lower electricity bills in California. What? We don't know. To be announced. And this is August. This is when it gets really busy in Sacramento. Watch for that energy trailer bill and whatever they're doing to help out the energy companies so they can maybe cut rates a little bit.
So they can have an empty bill at this point, and then they'll fill it in later, the blank bills. You've
Exactly.
talked about this, year after year, because they do it year after year. Everything about this is crazy. It is totally symptomatic of what's going on. It's a direct analogy to the gas prices, where their policies elevate gas prices both directly with the gas tax, which is the highest in the country, indirectly through the regulations on the refineries and so on, and then, of course, on the clamping down, failure to issue permits for our own production here in California. I've been there in Kern County, vast reserves of oil and gas that we could use here and just send in a nice pipeline to the refinery, cleaner, cheaper,
Right.
better. Instead of that, we're shipping it in from Venezuela and Iraq and Ecuador on giant super tankers that are the most polluting forms of transportation on earth, costing more. I mean, the whole thing is, and then they say, oh, why are you price gouging? They're all-
Exactly. Exactly. And then
They're
they
the
want they
price
want to
gougers.
sue them for causing climate change, and they want to go after them for
It's just
so-called price
totally
gouging.
incoherent. It's so unbelievable. And then I did notice that in the late, then they set up this commission, didn't they, to look at the price gouging, which in fact they are the price gougers
Yes.
with their policies. And then one idea in this was actually to nationalize California's energy industry, to nationalize take over the state, to take over the refineries, literally like Venezuela. It is just unbelievable. A couple of things I just want to say on the wind and solar as well, which is that it's not even that they're not even consistent and coherent on this, because actually they're reducing the incentives for rooftop solar. So it's not even just any solar. They hate the idea that I guess that people will be able to be truly energy independent if you want to put solar panels on your roof and it works for your property. Great. I think that's a great thing. And you can have battery, charge your car. It's self-sufficiency, which I think is a good thing. But they've actually made that worse, made that harder for people, because it's all about these giant industrialized solar farms. I've got to believe that's because there's corruption going on here, because it's the utilities, right? So if you are truly self-sufficient, energy independent in this sense of your home, solar panels on your roof, battery to store it overnight, whatever, and you kind of make that work, you're off the grid, and so you no longer need but these utilities are massive donors to the Democrat politicians, and also the people who do this solar and wind engineering, and there's a whole racket there. I mean, I remember doing a piece on it back in the day on my Fox show, the corruption in this so-called green energy. I mean, it's not even that. I mean, the environmental costs of it are very high. I mean, one thing I've learned talking to farmers, I've spent a lot of time in the Central Valley. It's really interesting. No one talks about this. There's for some, trees, agricultural tree, nuts and fruit and so on. I think it's particularly for nuts. They have this term that they all, it's actually central to how you grow, which is chill hours. There needs to be a certain number of hours per year during which the temperature is below a certain level that enables the normal growth process of the nuts. And I think it's something like 1,000 hours per year. The temperature has to be below that. In the Central Valley now, where they're putting these solar farms, the solar farms actually create more heat because they concentrate the heat. So they raise the temperature in the immediate environment. So you've actually, I mean, a sort of fun way of putting it, Susan, is you have solar farms causing climate change in the local microclimate.
It's going well, I think. This is
Crazy.
so irrational. Another reason that they're discouraging rooftop solar is because the utilities have to cover the cost of buying all the fossil fuels and the imports and the nuclear, everything else. Well, who pays for that? The customers pay for that. To the extent that solar customers opt out, the other customers are left with a heavier
They
burden.
pay for it. Yeah,
Right. So
exactly.
so this was part of the rationale behind what they did 2 years ago, which was to
Right.
require these income-based fixed charges. The idea was that everyone pays a fixed charge that's higher based on income. The idea was to get these people who have the money to do solar panels on their beautiful homes to pay more so that people who live in apartments won't be stuck with a higher bill.
No, I think that's right. If you want to do it, you should pay for it. I think that's right. Just like all of this stuff. If you want to have an electric vehicle, great. But why should a hardworking, sort of working class, taxpayer in California pay for you to get a subsidy for that? It's ridiculous. The whole thing is so unfair. And it is working class people who get hammered by all this.
They get the higher bill because they're paying for the gas plants and the nuclear plants, and the solar people were not. So now the solar people are paying for it also, and they're not happy because their incentive, their math to pay off the solar thing has completely changed
Yes.
now that they're not getting the benefits that they thought they'd get. So
Ugh.
it's very unfair. What we need is a policy that prioritizes abundant, affordable
Exactly right.
energy and
Exactly right.
give up the silliness that we're going to lead the world to green energy with solar and wind, because that's just not happening.
We should be leading the world in nuclear, apart from the
Yes.
others. We're California. We're supposed to be world leading, but instead it's just so embarrassing. Just as a sort of small tease for what's coming up from my organization, Golden Together, our next policy report is actually going to be on energy. We just released one on water abundance. And people can check that out at goldentogether.com. And we're going to be doing energy abundance next. And there's just a simple, idea here, which is so common sense, which is we should have, the goal should be affordable, reliable energy that is as green as possible, instead of green energy at any cost, which is what we have now. It's just stupid.
Exactly right. Stupid is exactly the word for it. It's fully idiotic. It is blithering idiocy, and we are all paying for it.
I love that. Blither. I always thought you've used that before. I love it when you say that, Susan, because to me, blithering it's a very, to me, it sounds like it's an old-fashioned, very English, British English, and so I love it when you say it. Is it American? Blithering?
I don't know. I don't know if it's American, but it's California for sure.
It's very good. It's definitely Californian. It just reminds me of I think that there's some, maybe when I was a kid there was a series of storybooks and it was set in a school and the head teacher, "You blithering idiot," would be to some kid. But that's what this is. It's absolutely unbelievable.
It can all be fixed. It's all man-made damage, and it can all be fixed.
Yes, and actually, let's also just remind ourselves of the pathology here, which is that it's so classic. The fact that he's trying to say we're going to have a solution to the problem that we caused, rather than stopping doing the thing that's causing the problem. You're going to come up with some other solution, which is bound to involve some kind of bureaucracy and more government, and it's going to end up pushing the prices higher. It always does.
It always does. You're exactly right.
Unbelievable. Well, at least we're here fighting for sanity. Susan, thank you so much for being with us again.
Thank you, Steve.
Joining us for Candidate Corner today, I'm so happy to welcome, I'm going to call you my friend, Christy Bruce Lane, because we had such a great connection. I was down with you in San Diego the other day. I'm giving it away now. I usually ask our candidates, say, where are you running and what's your district? So we're down in San Diego, had a wonderful event. I was proud to support you. I remember thinking, this is exactly the kind of person we need to send to the state legislature. So without further ado, tell us, just give us the basic information, a little bit about yourself, the district, why you're running, what you hope to accomplish, all of that stuff.
Okay, well, thank you for having me, Steve. It's nice to see you again. So Christy Bruce Lane, I'm running for State Assembly here in District 76. It's pretty much situated in North County, San Diego. I'm running because we're going the wrong direction, not only in the nation, but we're clearly going the wrong direction in the state of California as well. My background, I was born and raised in the Valley in Bakersfield, California. I like to call it God's country, in a farming family. I went away to school and then started in the corporate world, and I worked in corporate healthcare and agriculture for most of my life. Got out of that, started my own business. It's called the Thumbprint Project Foundation. And what we do is we help transition homeless children who've been impacted by childhood domestic violence and human trafficking. And ran my first race in 2020, won that handedly, 70-30 defeat. And I was elected as the director of Water District. Water's in my blood, fighting for water's in my blood. Coming from the Valley and agriculture, I understand how important it is. We can talk about the water issue, Steve, if you want to on this. this podcast as well. But and then quickly realized after having a successful run as a director that I needed to get the state level to really implement the policies that need to be implemented in California to make our lives better here in this state. So that's the reason why I'm running. I'd say the second biggest reason why I'm running is I have a little 9-year-old named Luke. He's my heart outside my chest. And our kids really don't have a future moving forward in this state. And, I wish my child could grow up with the childhood that I had, where we didn't have sexually violent predators roaming our streets, where you could go out in the front and play, where the homeless and the addicted aren't roaming our streets. And the cost of living is going to kill our future generation, where we're in the business now of exporting our children out of state. So we have a bouquet of crises here, a bouquet of reasons why I'm running, but that'll give you an idea of where I fit.
It's a great way of putting it, and a terrible commentary on where we are. We're exporting the next generation because they can't afford to live here, can't afford to buy a house, to raise a family. It's an absolute disaster. We're becoming a state where, it's for the old and very rich and very poor. We depend on the government. I mean, it's just a nightmare. I just wanted to ask you to talk about the sort of dynamics of the race a little bit, how it's looking, the significance of you winning in terms of the overall political map in California.
Yeah, so my district is split out basically a third and a third and a third. So a third Democrat, a third Republican, and a third no party preference. We barely missed the seat last cycle. I barely missed unseating a long-term incumbent by a couple percentage points. And this cycle, it's an open seat, and it's really significant. I am the front runner. I'm the leader. I'm expected to win, and we will win this seat. The reason why this seat is the number one targeted seat in the state of California is because I can actually block votes. Now, a lot of people don't know that there's bills that pass in Sacramento by one vote. So having that seat up there will give me that opportunity to do that. And then also due to my experience in the issues. So I have experience in reducing the cost of living and fighting crime and homelessness and education. It gives a seat at the table for somebody with experience that can talk common sense, bring common sense policies with data, and bring a little bit more balance to Sacramento, which is what we need.
I just think it's so important that people understand that, because I know, and you hear this too, there's a lot of defeatism, and people say, well, what's the point? It's such a Democrat state and it's not going to make any difference. And they have this super majority in the legislature. They have such an overwhelming advantage. Let's remind ourselves of the numbers in the state legislature right now. Out of 80 seats in the assembly, you have 62 Democrats, 18 Republicans. On the Senate side, 32 Democrats, 8 Republicans. And so people look at that and say, well, what's the point? Well, could you just go a bit deeper on that? There is a point. I mean, even just one, of course, a goal would be to end the 2/3 majority, which gives them a super majority, which means they can, am I right? Things like taxes and a budget they can do without any kind of input. But even before that, you can make a difference.
Yeah. So another difference that I can make, and I have experience doing this as well. In my last elected seat, I blew the transparency doors wide open. And so I put out a newsletter at my own expense, exposing my vote, my board members' votes, the policy, and why I voted that way. We need transparency up in Sacramento. We don't have it right now. And that is a commitment and a promise I've made to my district in the state of California. Because remember, Steve, my vote just doesn't count for AD 76, my district. It really impacts everybody in the state of California. But I think voters need to be informed on what's going on in Sacramento. And that transparency needs to happen. We need to push that information down to the voters so they can make an informed vote when it comes election time. They need to know what is going on up there. And that's something that we don't see right now.
Give us a sense. I mean, I got a very strong sense of the kind of person you are, right? When we spent some time together. As a compliment.
Okay, I'm laughing because I don't know which way.
No, very much as a compliment. In terms of just, someone who's really, really, just across the board, you have the knowledge and the understanding of the issues, the passion to make change happen, and a fighting spirit. I thought all of that was very clear to me. How would you approach it if you're there in Sacramento?
Yeah, so it is approaching it with evidence-based data. It is approaching it with my experience. It is about reaching across the aisle and talking about common sense policy. There's moderate Dems in Sacramento that vote on the other side too. But it's really bringing this knowledge and experience up to the forefront and pleading the case as to why we need this change, why we need this bill, and bringing that data up there. We're all human, right? And the majority of Californians are suffering. Our polling shows that. I mean, nationally, 65% say we're going in the wrong direction. In my district, 60% of my voters are saying we're going in the wrong direction. We don't need some of the same progressive policies that we're seeing. People have to realize this can change. There are some things we can fix, but you've got to elect the right people. And I always run my campaign, and I've always stood on this ground. I really don't care what side of the aisle you sit on, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, no party preference. All of these issues impact us all. But we've got to get the right people elected up in Sacramento. And that's where I come in, Steve.
Exactly. And the idea that we're going to get any change in substantive ways by just voting the same way, I think that's the thing that people have to understand. Like, there is a majority for change. You see it in the polling, you feel it in the air. People saying, yeah, we can't go on like this. Everything's just a disaster. There's nothing that's going well.
Yeah, and you're right. You can pick any of the issues. But what we do know, that all of the things that we're seeing, it's undeniable. And it's visible what we're seeing out on our streets, whether you're seeing crime, fentanyl use, homelessness, retail theft. This is all directly related to policy out of Sacramento. And people have got to realize that. So when people ask, well, what can I do? There's a supermajority. For one, vote differently. Number two, pick a common sense candidate. Let's get some good bills on the floor. Let's get them passed. And let's make the lives of Californians better. Look, government should never be a burden on Californians. And that's what's happening right now. Yeah. They should help people, but we're doing the opposite. When you look at just the cost of living for those suffering out in our district and in the state of California, which is the reason why you see a lot of people living, gas prices are up 46%. Consumer prices are up 19%. Groceries, 21%. Electricity, 28%. Let's even look at our credit card debt, up about 45%. People are living off their credit cards. This is not sustainable here in California. It's not. Our families are suffering, and our children. This is going to affect many generations ahead of us.
What did you think about the, how we've ended up in this situation? I just wanted you to, I'd love your take on something that you hear a lot, which is that people talk about the Republican brand. And they say, just says something about California and it's going in this particular direction and it's going further and further to the left. And even people who agree that we need change, there's like, yeah, but I can't bring myself to vote Republican. There's something about the brand. Do you hear that? Is that changing? What do you make of that whole line of argument?
Yeah, so what's interesting, I always go back to look at the candidate. The biggest compliment, Steve, that I get in my campaign is people don't know what side of the aisle I sit on.
Right.
And like I said before, I really don't care what side of the aisle you sit on, because I'm a person that's about the people. I'm a person that's going to fight for what's right for the people, for more affordability in California, a secure future generation for our children, lowering our taxes, fixing our homelessness problem that we have. It's a humanitarian crisis. Our cities are turning into graveyards. San Francisco is a prime example of that. And we're seeing it, the devastation across California, and decreasing the crime. Look, these are issues that cross the aisle here. So when I say, I don't really look at an R or D, and that's why I encourage people and voters really dig into those candidates and learn what they're about. Don't just vote whether they have an R or D past their name.
And what about the influence of national politics on your race?
Yeah, I really don't look at that too much. I look at California. We've got to fix California. And it's important and it's critical. And we can fix California. But the reason why, Steve, it's so important is because nationally, they're going to take California and take that blueprint. They're creating the progressive, crazy policies, and they're going to try to replicate it across the United States. And I can guarantee you that people on the outside of California looking in are saying, no, we don't want those policies here. So much so that I have donations not only coming in from up and down the state of California, But as far as the East Coast to my race, because they realize the importance of my seat and they realize it starts and ends here in California.
No, I completely agree with that. It's really important, and that's why we've got to lead the fight here. And that's why I hate this whole, you see, you get it, I'm sure, the whole time as well. Why are you bothering? You just leave California.
Yeah, I'm not leaving. And I don't expect anybody to leave, but we need people to stand up. Forget the ideologies, stand up and fight for what's right for you, what's right for your family, and what's right for your children. And I think you'll see a lot of common ground if you just focus on that.
So let's talk about some of the issues. You mentioned water. Is that because you're, obviously your experience there? Tell us a little bit about what you want, what you think needs to happen, and what you would work for.
Yeah, there's plenty of water here, Steve. A part of my newsletter, what I did is I tracked the millions of acre feet that got flushed out to the ocean every month. We have over 1 million people in the state of California that don't have fresh, clean drinking water. That's shameful right there. The problem is mismanagement, and we need storage. And, we had a bill, a bond passed in 2014. It was $7.1 billion, and not one penny of that has been spent on storage. And you can certainly see this data for yourself, and Public Policy Institute of California has published there where all that money has been going. Our farmers need water, Steve. I mean, talk about the connection here. If you don't have water that's supplied to our farmers, when you sit down at the dinner table every night and you look at that fresh, nutrient-dense food, that's going to decrease. We're already seeing the increase in prices, but we need water for our health as well. And water is connected to so many things, whether it's building out new cities. I mean, LA, if you look at the water history, LA would never be here today if the infrastructure wasn't put in place to supply water to LA. San Francisco, the same thing. We need to focus on the management of water. We need to focus on where the money's being spent, and we need to store it. I mean, we have free water every year in the form of rain. We need to capture that free water and store it. There is no reason why we should be using less and paying more for our water. Right here in San Diego alone, our water rates are about to increase 40%. That's 4% per district. That's incredible. People already can't afford water bills. They can't afford electricity. They're living off their credit cards. These are basic necessities that people should not have to worry about. And it's all due to bad policy out of Sacramento. It's all due to special interest groups.
Yes, I mean, and we just as a note to people, they can follow up. I mean, you got it, you nailed it, and you almost word for word describing some of the language in our latest policy report from Golden Together on water abundance. I mean, it's exactly right. And it's just so, I mean, the other connection I would just make, I mean, you touched on it, I'll just, go a little bit further, which is, and relating it back to what we're saying in terms of families and having to leave the state. One of the reasons that we don't have enough, why housing costs are so high, we're not building enough housing. And one of the things that is constantly used as a barrier to build housing is, well, you can't build housing. There's no water. There's not enough water. Well, we could have enough water if you got rid of these stupid policies.
Well, yeah. And not only that, I mean, we talk about the regulations and the red tape and the fees the government is charging builders. It's like $100,000 to cost, they add to the cost of building a new home. Yeah, this is all directly related back to Sacramento bad policy.
100%. Oh, that's the thing. And it's interesting to me I mean, maybe the message is getting out there. I'm out there saying this the whole time. I do feel like there's this momentum that's building for change in California, and you're part of it, and I want to be part of it. But it has been a long time where things have got worse and worse and worse, and people haven't really connected it to the policies in Sacramento.
Well, that's why transparency is so important when you have legislators that actually stay connected to their district. I mean, our last assembly person in this district, there was a reason why we gave him the nickname Missing Manshine, because he was never around. He never connected to his voters and kept in touch with his constituents. And we need more legislators like that will relay the information to the voters before the bills pass, right? There are bills up there where the grassroots can really bubble up and rise up and stop a bill and apply so much pressure to their legislators. Human trafficking bill is one of those, SB 14. So that's the power of knowledge to the people. And we haven't had that in a long time in California. They're left in the dark.
Yeah, but there's a real energy. I mean, this is what I'm really enjoying actually is as I'm going around the state is meeting. We really do have fantastic candidates, and that's why I'm so happy we can have you and others on the show so you can get your word out and people can realize there's something going on here. We've got some great candidates. We've got great common sense arguments. We don't just have to accept this and this inevitable decline. No, we can turn things around.
That is exactly right. We can turn things around, Steve.
So tell us a little bit about the. I want to end with asking you to sort of explain to people where they can get involved and support you and so on. But I'm just curious, as a candidate and a professional person, you've had a professional career. What are the things that work? What is it like being a candidate? What do you do with your day? I think people would be interested in that.
Yeah, it's a struggle sometimes balancing a job with being a candidate. But, I always seem to find, more hours in the day than are provided. I mean, experience matters, right, for a candidate. I think that's important. And so my day-to-day is very busy talking to constituents, holding meet and greets, holding fundraisers, going to different meetings that people can actually come and talk to me. How people can help a candidate like me and all candidates is, donations are always at the top of the list. And the reason why is because we use that money to, get the message to those voters who may not hear our message or who are working and who may not be able to come out and meet us. So donations are always top of the list. Hosting meet and greets, putting a yard sign out, simply putting a yard sign out. That way people know your name. They can look you up on your website. My website is www.christybrucelane.com. Volunteering is huge for candidates as well. People to walk precincts, people to phone bank as well. All of these things matter. Every little action matters. And people got to realize that in election cycles. I'm very passionate about going to the state and actually making a difference for all Californians. And candidates have to have that passion because it's hard work and you have long days and you have long hours and it can be daunting. But you got to fight through that and you just stay focused on your purpose and you'll get there. You'll make it.
Exactly. Well, I love that attitude. And it's nice that, because you're told the whole time, well, it's all, social media and online and whatever. And so there's not the human contact, but it sounds like you really you enjoy the human contact and you do that.
Yeah, I love meeting people face to face. Quite frankly, the media here in my district, they're not on our side and we work around the media here. But I love talking to people. People are fascinating. I love hearing people's stories, where they came from, what do they do for a living. I really like hearing what their struggles are and what can I do to help take that burden off of those families. So I can guarantee you what they've gone through, I've also gone through myself. So I really enjoy the face-to-face. So that's why I always say, come out and meet me at our meet and greets or come to a fundraiser. You don't have to donate. Just come. I want to meet you. I want to talk to you. I want to hear really what's on your mind. It's not about me. It's really about you because that's why I'm going up to Sacramento and fighting.
Fantastic. We love it. So just to remind everyone, it's Christy with an IE, by the way.
With a K too. Kristie. And then Bruce Lane, Batman's sister, BRUCELANE.com.
Very good. And social media?
So I'm on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram and I'm on Facebook.
And what are the handles there?
So my Twitter is at KL Bruce Lane. My Instagram is Christy Bruce Lane. And my Facebook is Christy Bruce with the number 5.
Amazing. All right. We got it all. Fantastic. Christy, it's so great to see you. Hope I can come down and support you again. You're the best. Really appreciate your time today and good luck with everything.
Thank you, Steve. I look forward to seeing you soon.
All right.
Let's win.
All right, here's something I want to get off my chest this week. I kind of got it off my chest a little bit on X earlier. You may have seen my post about that. I'm going to tell you what I said there directly now, which is, come on, Republicans, get it together. Get it together when it comes to formulating your arguments against Kamala Harris. We talked about it at the top of the show. She's on the left. She panders to the left. Tim Walz is on the left. This is a left-wing ticket. America is not a left-wing country. These are extremist positions that she holds that Tim Walz holds and that the party activists who are really in control, you can tell that from the way she panders to the left, they're way outside of the mainstream. And so it's really important that Republicans focus the argument on that, on substance, on the policies, on how a Harris and Walz administration would hurt you and your family. They would make you poorer and less safe. Those are the arguments that need to be made. And none of this stuff is so ridiculous, endlessly going on about, her laugh or the racial stuff, or it's not her race or her gender or how she laughs or any of this stuff that's going to persuade a single voter to change their vote, or someone who wasn't going to vote to come and vote for the Republican ticket. None of that's going to be persuasive, right? In the end, people vote based according to their sense of their interests, right? Who's going to be better for me, my family, my community, the country? And it's that mix of things. And there's so much material to work with, not least the fact that we can see the result of the kind of policy agenda, the ideas that this Kamala Harris, Tim Walz team now represents. We can see it in action. What happens when their ideas are implemented without constraint? You see it right here in California. That's what we've had in California now for nearly 20 years without limit, because it's been one party rule. So where it's been tried, where the Harris agenda has been tried, it is a total failure on every front. You're a regular to the show, you know the list by now, but just as a quick reminder, we have here in California, thanks to these far left policies, the highest unemployment in America, the lowest income growth, the highest housing cost, the lowest home ownership, the highest poverty rate, the highest gas prices, the highest energy costs, the worst business climate. I mean, on and on. Every single thing. The public schools are a disaster. Crime is a disaster. Homelessness. Everything has failed. It is a total failure, this far left agenda. And that's the point that needs to be made in that very simple phrase, which was used to great effect, by the way, in the 1988 presidential election by the first President Bush as a candidate against Michael Dukakis, the governor of Massachusetts. I don't remember the exact slogan, but the version for today would be this: don't let Kamala Harris do to America what her ideas have done to California. That's it. That's what you need to say. All this other stuff is a distraction and is a waste of money and time and resources. There's not a lot of time. They're trying to get this in before people wake up and realize the actual consequences. I mean, they're explicit about it. There was a story in the New York Times that explicitly said the Harris campaign is hoping to get through the next, few weeks, because that's all it is. Remember, with early voting, the election starts in September. The majority of people apparently vote in the first couple of weeks after that starts. So this is not months, this is weeks until the election is underway. And they are hoping to get to that point without any scrutiny. They said it very clearly. There's a briefing to the New York Times. They're hoping to avoid scrutiny of her positions, her policies, anything. That's what they want. So it's incredibly important that the Republicans get it together, focus on the substance, focus on the consequences. A Harris-Walz administration, these people who are unprincipled machine politicians who pander to the left, would be a disaster. It would make you poorer. It would make your community less safe, your country less safe. That's what they need to focus on. Don't let Kamala Harris do to America what her ideas did to California. All right, everyone, that is our show for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. There's a really, really great episode of Big Ideas Book Club out right now with Michelle Steeb. It's about homelessness. And if you follow the issue closely, you probably think, yeah, I know all there is to know about homelessness and what a disaster the policies have led to this explosion. Honestly, I thought I really knew the issue. And then I had this conversation with Michelle, who's written a brilliant book about it and has been working on it for many, many years. She's a real expert, and I learned so much. So if you really want to understand why this homelessness epidemic has just been let rip and there's no sign of it being solved, particularly here in California, you have to listen to this episode of Big Ideas Book Club. Follow us on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you very soon.